Hey everyone, it's LS, and this is the patch 8.3 notes rundown, so we're just going to get right into it. So the Swain reveal came out this patch. We're not going to be talking about him in this video. I'll make a separate video for him, so we're just going to skip right over that. Azir. So Azir right now in the meta is basically undisputedly the best mid laner that you can reliably pick a pretty high percentage of the time. And what I mean by that is that he's up there with Zoe, but Azir is more commonly the one that does end up getting through, both in competitive and obviously solo queue. So you take a look at the changes to him, Q Conquering Sands. Basically, this is the important thing that you have to pay attention to. It's going to be the same champion at rank 3, or rank 3 for his Q. The W Arise change, I don't want people, again, to overreact to something like this. I think in a lot of instances, this kind of a change actually ends up helping champions rather than hurting them. Yes, it will hurt his lane dominance in the early stages of the game, leading up to pre-level 6, so that's going to definitely impact his solo queue play. It'll obviously impact his competitive play, but I don't think it's going to impact it nearly as much as some people are thinking. Just basically, if you position the soldiers, you're basically getting the same value that you were getting previously out of Azir. I mean, I ultimately think he's probably just going to be knocked down from an S tier to an A tier. He's still going to be Azir, so if you're picking him for the mid game or late game purposes, he's still going to be your guy. And late game Azir is still going to be that monstrosity that you want in the game, to make use of his long range engage, his utility. He just offers so much. So Azir's not really going to be going anywhere. I think that the balance change is pretty actually good by Riot in this case, and so that's all that we're going to say for Azir. Moving on to Jarvan the Fourth, base armor decrease, 38 to 34. He's been popping up a little bit more lately in solo queue over some of the more favored junglers, but for the most part, I mean, I don't know exactly how this affects his clear. Probably not dramatically. I think that it's probably just a balance change that brings him in line a little bit more, but it's just sort of one of those really weird balance changes that just gets thrown out there, and you don't really know how to take it too much. I don't think that he's actually one of the biggest problems inside of the jungle right now. He's also not even being used as a flex. So one of the things that this does actually end up impacting is top lane Jarvan, even though we're not really seeing him at all. It is something to take notice of if the possibility would ever come back for him to return to top lane for some reason. He's still going to be missing those base stats that are basically being taken away from him because of his presence inside of the jungle. Jhin. So they really managed to fix Jhin here, and by fix I mean it did nothing at all. So our curtain call gets an extra 10 base damage. All right, now so for all the people in solo queue, it's probably getting 10 if you're lucky, all right, because you're only hitting one bullet. But 20 at rank 3. They really fixed Jhin here. This has nothing to do with the fact that the keystones for him aren't really doing that much. Keystones have been nerfed across the board, and then on top of that, lethality getting nerfed, and the fact that Jhin just doesn't have a very reliable build path compared to other ADCs right now. So Jhin is basically the artist that's broke and struggling to live paycheck to paycheck, except he hasn't been living paycheck to paycheck, and he's using a false address as he works at Dunkin' Donuts. So, I mean, Jin's not coming back to the meta anytime soon, and these buffs are pretty much a joke. And so, unless something completely gets overhauled with, and what I mean by that is the numbers on his Q or his W. I mean, I could actually see them just making his damage come back and making it more rewarding for hitting a W. Using Jin's W is something that I think, even at the highest MMRs, even in competitive, I don't think that it's utilized as well as it could be inside of laning phase and out, just for the poke, just for actually hitting it to hit it to establish some damage. I think if Riot actually took the approach of trying to swing a lot of damage into his W to make it more fair, and then maybe buffing some of his passive or just his generic base damage, whatever, that would be a lot better. But if you're going to take this kind of approach, I mean, this is as much of a laughingstock as the Zoe change that we're going to get to later on. So I don't really know what to say besides that. Katarina passive damage decreased. This is okay. Katarina's always a pretty scary thing in solo queue if it's played by someone that is proficient at her, and usually at an MMR where people don't know how to handle her. Besides that, though, she's not really a competitive menace. She's not going to be a competitive menace because it's very easy to play around her, identify what she's weak with. Very, very easy to prevent her from snowballing. And just the requirements to actually make her work and then pilot her in a competitive environment is just way too high. So oftentimes you're only going to find people having success with her in solo queue against people that are clueless as to how to play against her, coordinate against her, and then also, there's a lack of proper vision control, a lack of proper summoner spells being timed, and all this other types of stuff that she really flourishes in that type of an environment. So I think that the changes are okay, but they're not going to cripple or completely destroy all of the Katarina mains. Moving on to Kogmaw next. W maximum health damage decreased at later ranks. So Kogmaw is someone that I think I've said for probably about 2 or 3 patches now is the best AD carry in the game. And what I mean by that is previously Ezreal and Kalista used to be the I go with anything ADCs. They used to be the AD carries that could go into any team composition. They could basically be thrown realistically anywhere, and they could get away with it. Now that's Kogmaw. And a reason that it's Kogmaw is because of the way that the itemization is and the way that the meta is in other lanes. Kogmaw is almost always guaranteed to get to 2 and 3 items, and I don't think there's any scarier ADC in the game right now than Kogmaw at 2 and 3 items. You take into account the way that the keystones are right now, you take into account just how the bot lane meta, and again, the rest of the meta across the map is right now, and Kogmaw is your guy. So in competitive, he's really scary, primarily just because of, again, a guarantee to get to his later stage spike. And when Kog gets to that later stage spike, there's, again, so many champions in the meta to complement him. So when you take away the W maximum health damage decreased at later ranks, I mean, he's losing 2% of the target's maximum health at later ranks. Kogmaw, in most cases, he's overkilling opponents, and what I mean by that is the excess damage is not going to prevent his barrage from killing you. Obviously, this will impact him more so against, off tanks and tanks, but still, for the most part, Kogmaw is still going to be Kogmaw, and this is not going to move him from the limelight. He's up there right now, I think, with Varus, mostly on Korea. I don't actually know how NA and EU are going, but basically... you're looking at Kogmaw and Varus as the kings of bottom lane right now. And again, the problems aren't with the champions themselves, and I don't like how the balance change approaches are being taken at their own damage, because mostly the issue is Guinsoo's is just insane on these two champions. It also provides a ramp that is very, very difficult for other champions in the game to match, and it's also just a ramp that a lot of other champions can't really do anything against. And what I mean by that is the initial statement is that the itemization that other champions go into isn't as good as the Guinsoo's, and then for champions that want to try to combat Kogmaw, it's very difficult to do so with your tier 1 or your core 1 core 2 items versus his core 1 core 2 items, and it makes it very obnoxious to try to run into him. And similarly, that goes for Varus as well. The other problem is the Wit's End. So Kogmaw and Varus make absolute insane usage of the Wit's End. They basically give their teammates, which if they're running, double AP composition in top lane and mid lane, or if they have an AP jungler, AP mid laner, Kogmaw is basically giving his teammates 25 magic penetration. And with the changes that happened to runes a while ago, Kogmaw can end up giving basically all of his teammates true damage against the opposing team. And that's something that's very, very scary. The change that he's having right here isn't going to impact him against some team compositions because they're often just going to be too squishy. So yes, he is going to have a damage loss, but it's not going to be... the magnitude of it is not severe enough to knock him off his pedestal of being that S-tier AD carry. I do think that obviously this helps out Ezreal, it helps out Kalista, it helps out other ADCs that are trying to break through, but for the most part, the only reason that you choose champions like Caitlyn, like Ezreal, like Kalista, like Sivir, etc. is oftentimes for very, very specific purposes where, again, Kog can go anywhere that you basically want him to be. And that wasn't how Kog used to be. It used to be protect the Kog, or you would put Kogmaw into a composition that was entirely based around a lot of scaling. But now, again, Unfortunately, because of Guinsoo's and Wit's End making him extremely tanky against, again, a lot of the meta right now, he does have a 1-item wake up. He has a 2-item wake up, and then he doesn't slow down. So that's a really, really big problem because he's basically the Malzahar of ADCs. So, Lucian, passive damage increased to early ranks, passive crit damage increased. So the changes here, I don't think they're going to bring him back to bottom lane. Obviously, this is a huge buff to top lane Lucian, and it's a huge buff to mid lane Lucian. But I think that the problems that he's facing in bottom lane, you don't want to allocate resources into him inside of that role and remove just having any of the other AD carries be present within your team composition. Really, really huge buff for solo queue. In addition to some of the other changes that we're going to talk about in mid lane on some of the champions, this is a pretty big buff in the right direction for Lucian. So you'll probably end up seeing him there. Mr. Yi. So Master Yi is a champion that on and off throughout the years, I and other high MMR players have always pondered and questioned, like, is the champion actually worthwhile? He's been utilized in scrims in Korea and in NA sometimes, not, with varying success, but obviously never really brought out for competitive play. He's never really broken that threshold, and very rarely does he show up in high MMR. Or at least on NA and EU, I think very rarely does he show up in a high MMR, while on Korea there's some Korean Master Yis that can actually get high MMR with him, and they play the game in addition to playing Yi. So one of the interesting things is he can be a very obnoxious champion, and if he's piloted by someone that is really playing the game, he can get kind of scary as like a ticking time bomb in a way. And if the enemy team composition isn't actually equipped to handle him, if he comes in the draft pick very late or something and they're just not properly set up to really lock him down or hold him down, or the lanes are set up in a certain way where Yi's just going to basically get to power farm, or he's actually going to have easy access to ganks, which he normally wouldn't have, it's kind of scary. So the Alpha Strike cost being reduced a little bit, that doesn't matter that much. The big change is actually in the Iwuju style, because he shreds through tanks already, and just getting free damage is kind of bizarre, but I don't think it's going to be enough. This isn't a change that is going to miraculously make him appear inside of competitor. At least I don't think. I mean, probably people will test him out more as he was tested out again in the past. One of the problems with Yi, though, is the change that, or not the change, but the fact that he benefits more so from red smite than any other smite, at least in a competitive setting. He really, really likes red smite. More so than green or blue. Obviously in solo queue, you can go blue, you can go red, you can go green, although why would you? But I just really don't know how to perceive this. He's been a really big question mark on and off throughout the years, and sometimes you see really, really insane knees that they know how to move around the map, they know how to path, they end up at places at the right time. You can see them play like mid and top lane sometimes. I mean, Faker pulled it out in LCK once, although, I mean, that's kind of that's a unique occasion. That's not like the other Korean Yis that I'm talking about. And they can be really scary, and they can be very obnoxious. So if you can actually have the mechanics on the champion, and then in addition to that, you're truly a jungle player, I think that things can get scary with him if the stars align. So that's all that I'm going to say about Master Yi. Rise. So this change is really interesting. What this basically means is, well, I don't know how popular Rise is on North America and Europe, but Rise is extremely popular on Korea. So what this change means is play a lot of solo queue today and tomorrow and pray that you're getting a guy playing Rise for the first time since the patch. You will get some free kills, and that's what you really need to go out and get right now. I think the change is actually really great. I think that the stopwatch Zhonya's thing was just a little bit too busted for Rise. I think that it was really unfair. The stopwatch change is something that we're going to assess later on inside of the patch notes, because that has been changed up a little bit. But the Zhonya's cancel was just absolutely ridiculous. It was too imbalanced of a get out of jail free card for Rise. So I really do like that they actually took the approach to change it. Sejuani, Q cooldown increased at early ranks. Sej is pretty popular. And I do like that they did write that she's pretty good at everything. For the most part, she is. She does have some pretty clear-cut weaknesses, but I think that the approach that they took to her is pretty soft. And in that regard, I think that, again, it's pretty good. She's going to be the same champion at the later stages. The early cooldown is going to hurt a little bit, but it's not the end of the world for her. And I think that's ultimately, it's fine. 4 seconds. And then at the later stages, you're not even going to notice it. So, okay. Base attack damage at later ranks increased for Tryndamere. E bonus attack damage ratio increased. This is a champion that, unlike Yi, I just don't think that it has any purpose being played realistically. When you ask yourself, like, I can pick Tryndamere, and then I can just respond with, or you could play Fiora, that's where the champion just basically, that's where the conversation ends. So base stats, attack damage growth 3.2 to 3.7. So he basically gets a longsword at level 18, E-spinning slash 120% bonus AD to 130% bonus AD. Thing is that Tryndamere doesn't entirely itemize just raw attack damage. He often gets the hybrid items in the sense that he gets AD and attack speed. And so this isn't a massive change for his E-spinning slash. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you don't really want Tryndamere. You actually want Fiora. There's other champions that outperform what he's able to offer, and the instances in the past where he could actually exist as a pretty unique counter lane matchup don't really currently exist right now. So this isn't going to do anything to him. These are pretty laughable changes. Viktor. Okay, so this champion's basically unplayable. These changes don't assess what makes Viktor atrocious late game. Basically, Viktor used to be this champion, once upon a time, where when Viktor had 3 items, things were scary. When Viktor had 4 items, it was like walking on, in on your mother in the shower. When Viktor had 5 items, he just continued to increase in size and fear. The opponents would just get more fearful as the game went on, and then Viktor at 6 items used to basically be the other king of mid lane with Azir, and oftentimes that was paired up with the Jhin meta, and Viktor was a placeholder in the mid lane. And I thought he was a pretty good champion in the mid lane. He was pretty difficult to pilot. He were rewarded for good play, and then they just gutted him, and then changes came in, and he got gutted inadvertently throughout that. And now the changes that they're trying to give to him is Siphon Power. Augment Turbocharge now also increases Siphon Power shield value by 60%. The only thing that my immediate question was here is, can you actually just Hex Core upgrade Q first and then take one-sided trades? That's the only question mark that I had when reading this, because there were actually some matchups where you could get away with maxing Q first rather than E, and then you could just go for the turbocharge, or you could go for the augment onto the Siphon. I don't really know if that's going to be the case, and even if it is the case and it does let him take completely one-sided trades, it doesn't matter. He's still missing the damage late game. His lasers are still an absolute joke. The Chaos Storm cooldown, I mean, these are placebo buffs, okay? Viktor is not a champion that you're looking to cast his ultimate off cooldown. He is not a champion that when the ultimate's up, you go, oh man, I have to use his ult right now. No, he's not that champion. He's a control champion. He looks for his positionings. He dances for them. He waits. He's patient. He pokes out with the Z. He is not reliant on having Chaos Storm. This is not Twisted Fate. This is not Shen. This is not Nocturne. This is not Talia. These changes are jokes. They're just complete and utter jokes. Even if you go into the sorcery tree and you get Ultimate Hat or something for his 80 seconds and you get him to, for some reason, 45% CDR, it's still not at a point where you're just casting Chaos Storm to cast it, because it's going to be up again so soon. These changes don't even begin to touch on the surface of what is making Viktor bad. The item nerfs throughout the years, again, the rune changes affected him, other changes that they hit Viktor with. He needs damage back. If you want Viktor to come back into the mid lane, you probably need to give him more damage inside of his E. Or you need to give him, Q damage back or something, or do something for his damage stats, because right now he's just basically a joke. He needs too much ramp up, And there's just so many other champions that exist right now in the mid lane that they don't need as much ramp as Viktor in order to be effective. And now, the moment that we've all been waiting for. Oh, God. Oh, shit. Oh, God. Oh, shit. Maybe an 8.4, guys. maybe an 8.4. Yeah, maybe an 8.4. Alright, let's go to runes. Alright, let's take a look. Let's take a look at Unsealed Spellbook. Unsealed Spellbook. 25% to 15%. This is pretty balanced. The thing is that Unsealed Spellbook is just inherently better than a lot of the other keystones that exist right now and other trees. The value that you get out of the inspiration tree is just enormous. I don't think that this is actually going to impact that many champions. It's not going to, or at least not in a negative sense. So, it obviously will be felt, but it's not going to be felt to the degree. I think that had this gone lower, if it went to like 10%, it's still usable, because you think about what that means to flash, what it means to teleport, you know, what it means to ignite, and then you begin to question, okay, like, that kind of hurts. But I think this is actually a pretty good area. It's a pretty good number that they arrived at, and I actually have to really give Riot credit here. I think the 15% is really balanced. But again, Unsealed Spellbook, the reason that it's popping up with such frequency, and I talked with, I think, Adrian Riven or something like a month ago or so, and basically with the nerfs that kept happening to all the runes across the board, League is headed towards a stage where you get so comfortable and familiar with the trading patterns and the habits of how laners are interacting with certain runes like Airy, like Comet, like Fleet Footwork, etc., that I think that much like when the initial rune changes came out a few years ago and everyone was trying to relearn how to play, I think that it can get to the point again where everyone just starts wanting Unsealed Spellbook, realistically. So, I don't know. I don't know if that'll end up happening, but I do think that it's a pretty high possibility. And so, with that in mind, obviously a change to this is welcome. So now assessing the inspiration tree changes. So Hextech, Fast Traption, no change there. Magical Footwear is now on the same line as Perfect Timing. What I think this ends up, well, and also it should be noticed that the sell value is down from 120 to 20 gold. That's quite big. That's basically 5 minions missing if you would just get it with the intention to sell it off later. That's obviously a really nice change. The thing is that the combo was part of the obnoxious parts. I do like that they didn't completely gut Perfect Timing. I do think that it's actually a pretty good keystone, forces you to play a little bit more intelligently. Although, yes, it does slow down the game. I'm interested to see exactly what the ratio will now be between people taking Magical Footwear versus Perfect Timing. Perfect Timing is more so an item that I think it benefits a lot more in competitive than it does in solo queue, although obviously in solo queue it's really nice for getting double kills. When people don't remember, they don't respect the Perfect Timing. One of the places that I think that obviously this flip-flop will... not flip-flop, but I think that the ratio will show its head the most is actually in bottom lane, because bottom lanes were the biggest abusers of using both. So with that out of the way, I still think that bottom laners probably take Perfect Timing. And mostly the reason that I say this is because sometimes bottom lane can actually get into a state where you do want to get the boots earlier. And, you know, being gated on that obviously isn't the best thing. So... Scoreboard changes, rune features, great rotating game mode, bug fixes, fantastic upcoming skins. You know, the only thing I like here is actually the Warwick thing looks pretty cool, and then the Lunar Revel Gnosis. Okay, not sponsored by Riot, by the way. We come down here, and okay, if you use any, okay, well, obviously these will obviously just be used insultingly. Okay, like basically, if you have any sort of intelligence inside of you, you will have these on standby for when you outplay the opponent or when the opponent messes up. You know, when the Zed like takes his shadow and then misses both his shurikens and then misses E on you somehow, you just flash that well played. Okay? When you kill the guy trying to invade your jungle, you flash the GG on him. You know, you let him know that it's over. Okay? When you keep getting camped by that top laner, okay, or, you know, maybe you're playing against a Shinshin and he keeps getting camped by your jungler, just keep flashing that GLHF at him. They'll really love it, really ties into the psychological warfare component. I absolutely love the direction that Riot's taking some of these emotes. So, to recap one last time, I think Azir will still show his face inside a competitive. Jarvan changes, it just has to keep in mind the fact that, you know, this is obviously a nerf to top lane Jarvan, even though that wasn't the intention of the nerfs. Jhin joke, or Jhin nerfs are a joke. Katarina changes, not really going to impact her that much. Kogmaw, still the king of ADCs, although obviously Varus likes the change here a little bit more than Ezreal and Kalista. Lucian buffs to mid and top lane. Mr. Yi, I talked a lot about him. You can just go back in the VOD and rewatch that. Ryze change is completely balanced. Sejuani change is fair. Tryndamere change, why would you pick Tryndamere when Fiora exists? Viktor, he's an unplayable champion, so these changes, I mean, they're in a nice direction, but he's going to need a little bit more love. I'm really curious why they're so hesitant to actually just give him a little bit more love, or just do something that helps him out. I don't even know. Maybe you could revert his Hex Core thing. You could make his Hex Core go back down to 1,000. Even that's not going to just propel him back into the meta, although with the Q Siphon power, that could make his early game a little bit stronger, and rather than Viktor now be this, 4, 5, 6 item juggernaut, you could turn him into like a pseudo Ezreal, where he's really strong at like 1, 2, 3 items, and then he just begins to trickle down and taper off into the game. I can't even look at it. Alright, that's all for the patch 8.3 notes, and hope you guys enjoyed it.